What if Spider-Man's aunt, May, had died instead of Uncle Ben? For instance, what if Uncle Ben went out to bring a gallon of milk and found his wife dead on his return, with police all around his place? And just when police officers start explaining the incident to Uncle Ben, Peter comes and gets to know about the mishap. The culprit is hiding in a nearby warehouse, and they would catch him soon, as he is entrapped there. Enraged with grief and anger, Peter decides to punish the culprit himself, and while his uncle tries to stop him, he turns himself into Spider-Man, and that way his secret gets revealed in front of his uncle. Peter tells his uncle that the culprit must be trying to escape through a service tunnel inside the warehouse that the police don't know about. But he knows. Spider-Man starts running and climbing towards the service tunnel while his uncle runs behind him, trying to stop him, but in vain, as Spider-Man is too fast to be stopped by an ordinary human being. Spider-Man reaches the service tunnel while the police are trying to enter from the other side of the building, and as soon as he gets inside the tunnel, he finds out that the culprit is the same man he allowed to escape. The culprit opens fire, trying his best to get rid of Spider-Man while he dodges all of his bullets and shouts at him with anger that he did let him go, but he killed his aunt, so now he has to pay for it. The culprit, freaked out by fear, stumbled backwards and fell out of the window into the street. His uncle reaches there on time and finds out what he is fearing, so he asks Peter to hide, letting the police arrest him for murder of the culprit. Now Spider-Man is seeing his last loved one that's left being taken away. Uncle Ben confesses his crime and gets a lenient sentence because of the murder of his wife, while Spider-Man, who's just 15 to 16 years old and left all alone in the world, has now become a ward of the state, spending his life in the regret that all that happened is his fault. They try to place him with some foster families, but it just doesn't work out any time because of the anger issues he's got, and he always carries the burden of being a coward and a liar, if not being able to tell his uncle the fact that he could have stopped the guy who killed his aunt. His uncle always asks him not to repeat what he did in the past, behave himself, and not to worry about him, as he would be out of prison soon. The whole world is curious to know where did Spider-Man go all of a sudden, and during all this, the son of Mr. Jonah Jameson, Mr. John Jameson, who was an astronaut, dies, and people start relating his death to Spider-Man's disappearance. Mr. Jonah, who is also the publisher of the Daily Bugle, gets frustrated over the fact that Spider-Man was sharing the same headline space with his son, so he starts speaking out against Spider-Man in his newspaper and press conferences, calling him a menace rather than a hero, and saying that he was a bad influence on the youngsters. Spider-Man gets angry over Mr. Jonah for speaking all this trash about him, so he decides to teach him a lesson for bad-mouthing against him and goes to his office late night, hangs him from a tall building, warns him to shut his mouth or else he would show him what really a menace is, and then leaves. Peter feels good about himself for the first time since the death of his aunt and starts becoming a tough guy. He's sent to Ditto Juvenile Detention Center as a punishment for sneaking out so late without permission. Spider-Man finds Flash Thompson and Harry Osborn in the detention center. Harry, being the son of a rich man, manages to get out, so now the only person Peter knows inside is Flash, his school bully. Flash starts bullying him there too, so Peter decides to run away from the detention center, starts living on his own in an empty building, stealing food and other necessities at night, from marts to meet the basic needs, as he doesn't have any other choice left. He sees other people in the city who are as powerful as him, for instance the Avengers, the Hulk, etc., and he starts fighting against all the evil monsters like Doc Ock, the Vulture, and the Lizard. When Green Goblin kills an innocent person, it reminds Spider-Man of his aunt's death, and then he almost kills Green Goblin, but he survives. Then the world comes to know that Green Goblin is actually Norman Osborn, a millionaire and father of Harry Osborn. Peter thinks that this world is so unfair, as Harry's father kills people when he gets sent to the psych ward. On the other hand, his Uncle Ben doesn't do anything, and just tries to protect him, but he's rotting in jail. Spider-Man decides to break his Uncle Ben out of the jail. He goes to him at night and asks him to go along with him, but Ben denies to go, saying they would have to spend the rest of their life as escaped criminals, and May would never want it. Spider-Man tells him that he needs him, as whatever he tries to do turns out to be wrong, and the world is against him. While his Uncle Ben tells him that he had to take responsibility of his actions, because with great power comes great responsibility, and asks him to help those who are weak to make his aunt proudest. Spider-Man then tells his uncle about the burden he's carrying since the death of his aunt, that he could have saved her if he didn't let the man escape few days before the incident. But his uncle relieves this burden by telling him that it wasn't his fault at all, as he didn't know what would happen next, and that he can't go back to the past to change it, but he can change the future. So Uncle Ben advises him to go and live with Mrs. Watson, their old neighbor, and continue his studies to make his aunt proud. Peter Parker starts living with Mrs. Watson, finishes his school, gets admission to Empire State University on a science scholarship, falls in love with Mary Jane, Mrs. Watson's niece, and is rarely seen as Spider-Man because he's too focused on becoming a person that would make his uncle and aunt proud. On the other hand, his uncle gets early parole for his year of good behavior and comes back. They become a team. His uncle starts helping him as a tactician, driving around with a police scanner and a radio to Spider-Man. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel.